Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, where we answer your questions on political philosophy, on current events, on questions of culture, economics, history, all those things that affect our attempt to live well together in the Canadian community.
And here Dan asked a question that I've wondered about myself. He says, with all the issues around the oil pipelines, they can't get their pipelines built because of politicians in Quebec, essentially, these days. Why is it that the oil industry is not building refineries closer to the oil sands and do the refining there?
I think I'll start by quoting John Rhys Davies' classic line from Raiders of the Lost Ark, "Very dangerous, you go first." Because, in fact, really, they're not building refineries at all. It has been decades since there was any significant refinery construction anywhere in North America. There is a project it's an upgrader, so it's not technically a refinery, but there is work going forward in the oil sands, in fact, on such a facility. But these things are incredibly expensive to build. We are talking, $10 billion. They're enormously complex undertakings. Would you want to put that kind of capital on the line when you're exposed not only to the uncertainty of world oil prices, but also to the vagaries of politics and this new concept of social license, which basically means the rule of law no longer applies, politicians make it up as they go along, and you can jump through all the hoops and wind up getting a bucket slammed onto your head? Who would you personally, that's why I said very dangerous, you go first, would you put $10 billion into a venture like this, being so unsure what would happen? Because what's the point of refining the oil? Well, you got to put it in a pipeline. Even the pipeline's going to stop the unrefined oil. It's going to stop the refined product, right? There's all kinds of ways. People will raise all kinds of spurious objections, and you'll be out $10 billion. It's much safer to go with lower risk projects. And here I'm going to indict not just the entrepreneurs, because this is a rational response to unreasonable risk in politics, but the politicians. The incredible timidity behind their poses of boldness, where they're not willing to say, we need rational energy markets in Canada. We need to be respectful of the environment, we need to heed the voice of the public, and we need those products that heat our homes and cook our food and move us around. And we're going to create a regime that is fair, effective, and proceeds in a timely way. And until they do that, you'd have to be bonkers to put your own $10 billion into the oil sands. And even to try to do it with a lot of government subsidies would be a risk that would rightly frighten shareholders. So they don't build them because the environment for building such projects in this country is so hostile. And that is the fault primarily of the politicians.
Let me ask one thing to Dan's question. What if the people in charge of making decisions about pipelines and so on were to be forced, before they get to make a decision, to live for a month without oil? Before making that decision. That would be good,
Living
right?
for a week without oil. I mean, yeah, we live in a bubble wrap society. I have frankly thought that parole
Which is made
boards,
with oil too, right?
if parole boards release people who are high risk, they ought to have to serve the rest of the sentence too. That would change the calculation there really quickly. But yeah, I mean, it's so weird. Even in Quebec, you see this incredible resistance to a pipeline, but they've seen what can go wrong when trains carry oil. You'd think Lac Mégantic would make them appreciate the kind of safety trade-offs involved in forcing oil into other kinds of outlets. But we know we have this kind of magical thinking now where we don't concern ourselves with costs and benefits. We don't concern ourselves with trade-offs in the real world in which adults have to make decisions, none of which are perfect. Instead, we fantasize that we can just banish all bad consequences and, get sunbeams out of cucumbers and that sort of thing.
No, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, look at Ontario. 4% of our energy comes from these alternative energy projects. It accounts for 20% of the cost. In a normal world, this would be regarded as failure. Here it's full speed ahead. What gas plants? Nothing to see here, folks. And, as long as we let them get away with it in the end, they're not the chumps. We are.
All right. I don't like the sound of that. Maybe we need to change that. All right. Maybe that will be for another question some other day. Folks, the URL on your screen will take you to a page where you get the explanation on how to ask your question of the professor. Thanks, and see you next time.